I would not go back to being a freelancer. I love working with Alexis. I love having that help and not being alone. And, like I said, because our design styles complement each other and she brings a different flair and different ideas, it just ups the level of the work that my business puts out. And that's the thing I've really had to wrap my head around, is that it's not the work that I'm putting out, it's the work that my business is putting out. I've had to separate myself from my business. And that I think was one of the hardest sort of mindset shifts I had to go through with all of this.
Welcome to the Web Design Business Podcast with your host, Josh Hall, helping you build a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
Hello, friend. Great to have you here for this episode of the Web Design Business, because you are in for a treat on this episode. My guest, Sandy Burns, is an OG student of mine, actually one of my first students, and a founding member of my community, Web Designer Pro. And she recently crossed the 10-year mark in her web design business. And I personally think that if somebody hits 10 years in an industry and they still love what they do, they love their business, they love their clients, and they love the people they work with, I think that deserves an in-depth discussion on what they've done to get to this point and to hear about their journey. Now, Sandy, her journey was not all rainbows and butterflies and sunshine. She has gone through a lot in her 10 years as a web designer, including in this interview, she's going to open up about the highs and lows of building her web design business and how she actually almost gave it up. You're going to find out about what tool kept her in the game when she was literally on the way to a meeting to say she was done with web design. And then most importantly, in this interview, you're going to hear about how Sandy battled cancer and kept her business afloat during the time while she got diagnosed with cancer, and then eventually having breast loss and how she had to cope with that and keep her business afloat, her lessons on whether or not you should tell clients if you're going through a tough time personally. And what I'm really, really excited about for Sandy, now that she's on the other end of this wild recent journey through cancer as a cancer survivor and breast loss, but now she's scaling a small team that helped her get through this time. And she is just on an amazing trajectory and a really, really exciting next chapter for her personally and for her business. So needless to say, for all those reasons, I'm so excited to bring Sandy on to share with you about this journey to help you, whether you're early in the game and you're looking for some inspiration for somebody who's done it right to get to 10 years, or whether you're more established and you just, I don't know, maybe you need to hear something like this to help you look at your business and see what you can do to do what Sandy has done to really make a wonderful web design business that works for her, works for her family, and has given her the freedom and lifestyle that she loves with web design. She's just doing an amazing job. I'm so excited that she agreed to come on to the podcast here. Now, before we dive in, as I mentioned, she is not only a breast cancer survivor, but she lost her breast, and she's really passionate about sharing some of her journey through that and helping others. So if you are interested in getting some more resources on that, Sandy is actually writing a book. She is writing a book about her journey with breast loss and battling cancer. So if you or somebody you know might be interested in this, you can go to her website at sandfire.ca. She is a Canadian web designer, sandfire.ca. She's got a wait list for her upcoming book. So you'll hear more about it in the chat here, but I wanted to make sure I mentioned that so you can go to her website. And if interested, be on the wait list for her upcoming book. Sandy is just awesome. I'm going to stop talking because I want you to meet her and to hear this incredible journey, 10 years of web design, battling cancer, falling in love with scaling, and much more. Here is my student and just amazing all-around person and web designer, Sandy Burns. Sandy, it is so good to see you. It was better seeing you in person. I had such a good time actually finally meeting you after all these years. So I'm so excited to chat today. Thank you so much for taking some time to hang out.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for having me.
I don't even know where to start because you were an early student. I actually looked today. You signed on, I think my maintenance plan course, right, was the first course you joined, which was back in like January 2019, I saw. So I just wanted to start by saying it has been honestly an honor to see your journey progress over the past almost 5 years now. And then, isn't that wild?
5 years.
5 years. And then meeting in WordCamp that was one of the coolest things ever, just meeting you and some of the other web designer pros, and the stuff you were saying. I was like, dang it, why didn't we record this? It's so good. So we're going to probably just rehash the same conversation we had, but yeah, I just want to say it's been so cool to see your journey progress, and 10 years, right? You hit the 10-year mark.
Yeah, 10 years as of this past August, and I can't believe it. It's been an interesting 10 years for sure.
That is an amazing feat. I mean, I know I don't know what the stats are for web design, but small businesses generally, I mean, it's a very low percentage that make it past a couple years, even lower that make it to 3 to 5 years, and very low that make it to 10 years. So that is an accomplishment in itself, Sandy. That's amazing.
Thanks. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah, I don't know. I just keep going with it and hoping that it just, gets easier and gets better as we go along. So,
well, I feel like it has for you from what I've seen. So many things to dive into here, because you have just an incredible story, and you're an example that I show off in my business course and a lot of other resources, is like such a well-designed site that's personal and converts
Thank
well.
you.
But backing up, how did you actually get into web design?
Okay. So backing up a little bit further from that, my first career was in journalism. So after high school, I took a print journalism course at a college in Ottawa, and then worked as a journalist for a number of years, and then got married, had my 2 daughters, and I was a stay-at-home mom for a few years, and then got divorced. And then when my younger daughter started school, I'm like, okay, I need to get back into the workforce, but I didn't want to go back into journalism, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But there was something about web design that was really intriguing. And, I thought, okay, I wonder if I can make a go of this, but I didn't know how. I didn't even know what the starting point was. So I actually went back to the same college where I took journalism, and I took a program called Interactive Multimedia. And it was a 2-year program that was condensed down to 1. So it was crazy busy. But it was everything to do with multimedia. Okay. So there was website design was like sort of the bulk of it. So like HTML, CSS, PHP, MySQL database, which was boring, but I got through that. And, we'd learned all about how WordPress, all the PHP files that make up WordPress, and how to create a child theme and all that kind of stuff. But we also learned things like InDesign, Photoshop, Illustrator, Flash, because this was back in 2013.
Yeah, RIP.
Motion graphics, video editing, like everything, right? And it was funny because I was taking the video editing course going, there is no way I'm ever going to use video. And now you've got me using video all the time. So.
Right. And I know, and we were just chatting before we hit record, like your video game has upped tremendously, even for the last time we talked. Like you're on it, sending looms to clients and discovery calls and stuff. So that's really cool. I think it's common too, especially back in those days. It did seem like multimedia. I don't know if people still call it multimedia, or if it's different. I don't know.
I haven't really looked at the program since I graduated, so I don't know if it's changed names or not, but it was an incredible program, and that's what led you into WordPress. So I graduated at the end of that 8 months with honors, and I have to brag about that because it's the only time in my life I've ever gotten honors, and immediately started my website business, Sandfire Design, out of my home. But I got my first client right away because I live in a really, really, really small town, about an hour southeast of Ottawa, which is in Ontario, Canada. And it's a very tight-knit community, and I know a lot of people here. So as soon as I was already a customer for this client who became my first client, essentially. So I told them, I was taking website design and all this stuff. And they're like, oh, when you're done, we really need a new website. And I'm like, yeah, I know you do. So they were my first client out of the box. And I sat down to do their site, and I went, oh my God, now what? Because even though I know the fundamentals of website design and I knew how I wanted to design the site, I didn't have my tools in place. I didn't have my SOPs. I didn't have like a business set up because my thinking was I'm just going to freelance and work for myself. And that's how it's going to be. That was my plan. And so I didn't really have anything beyond that. So the first site, and actually the first 3 years, I struggled with crippling imposter syndrome.
So common too. I mean, I experienced that as well. As you know, it's like you get into web design, you're just excited to build websites and be a freelancer, but then you're like, uh-oh, I have a business. Even if I don't want to have a business and I plan to get a job eventually or something, I still have a business right now. Even if it's a side hustle, you have a side hustle business. So that's a really good point. How did you get by before we met and before you started joining some of my courses? Did you do any other trainings or courses, or did you just kind of fumble through figuring out invoices and project management and all that stuff?
Well, before I took this interactive multimedia course, I took a couple of weekend and evening courses just in like graphical user interface and HTML, just to kind of, I guess, metaphorically dip my toe in the digital water to see if this is what I wanted to do. And obviously it was, because I went into that course. But then, it was... So I didn't really take much in the way of courses after I graduated. I was really just kind of fumbling my way through, and the worst part was I'd never even heard of imposter syndrome. So I didn't know that what I was experiencing was something that a lot of people experience. I just felt like the biggest fraud. And why are people paying me to do websites? Because I don't know what I'm doing. You know what I mean?
Very common as well. Because I don't even think the term imposter syndrome, I don't know when that was talked about in the broader sense, but I suffered from that too. And I didn't know what it was called. I just thought I was, like an outcast who was like, well, I didn't come from this world. Who am I to be designing a site and figuring this out? So it's funny. I've talked to hundreds of web designers now who felt that. So I guarantee 99% of web designers, we're all feeling the exact same thing. So we're all unknowingly not in community together back then, feeling the exact same thing. So on the business side of things, you kind of fumbled your way in. I'm sure invoicing, project management, you just probably one project at a time, I imagine. Now, but I want to lead this to a really interesting point in your journey, because I did not know this until we got to meet up at WordCamp this year. But you told me you got to a point where you almost gave it up completely. Mm-hmm. So take us through that little section. Like, what happened? You became a web design freelancer, and then what led to you almost completely giving it up?
Okay. So, after 3 years, so we're now in January 2016. Okay. And I've been fumbling my way through for 3 years, and I really felt like I wasn't getting anywhere in terms of getting better and quicker at doing websites. And I really wasn't making that much money. I was actually doing some contract work a little bit on the side, like in more sort of graphic design kind of stuff. And, so I finally, the other part of it too was that every time I got a new client, I knew what I wanted to do in terms of designing their website, but again, I didn't have the tools in place, right? So I would spend longer than I care to admit looking through Theme Forest and trying to find a theme that as closely as possible resembled what I wanted to do. And then getting that theme and then CSSing the heck out of it for like a week or two and trying to get that design down. And, it wasn't getting me anywhere. So
you're giving me flashbacks, by the way.
I know.
Literally doing the exact same thing at the exact same time. We just didn't know each other.
Exactly. Like PTSD coming forward here, right? But anyway, so January 2016, I finally reached that breaking point. You've talked about that in your podcast before, where you reach this breaking point of like, that's it. I'm a fraud. I can't do this anymore. I'm not getting where I give up. So I thought, okay, I'm going to give up my business. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll figure that out, but I can't do this anymore. So, and it was a Wednesday that I came to this conclusion. And I know this because that night there was an Ottawa WordPress meetup group in Ottawa. And obviously, and I had gone to many of the meetings over the previous 3 years. I had made some friends there, and they had helped me a lot with my client sites over those years. So I thought, okay, I owe it to my friends there to, show up tonight, let them know I'm not going to do this anymore, thank them for everything and all that kind of stuff. So it's downtown Ottawa. So by the time I found a parking spot and got into the meeting, they were just about to start. So I didn't have a chance to talk to anybody. So I sat down, and the two people who run the meetup got in front, and they're like, okay, the person that we had scheduled to talk tonight had a family emergency and couldn't make it. So instead, we're going to demonstrate this new theme that we've come across, and it's called Divi. And they proceeded to demonstrate Divi, and my jaw hit the floor. I was like, oh my God, I'd never seen a page builder before. So, I mean, to be fair, it could have been anyone, but it just happened to be Divi that I came across, right? And they started talking about how with the sections and the rows, and here's all the modules, but then with each of these, you can adjust the spacing and the background and all these different things. And this was back in 2016 when they didn't have all the features that they have now. Yeah. And I was just like, oh my God, this is what I've been looking for. Like, so yeah, I think that night I went home and I started sort of playing around with Divi. And I think it was the next day I bought my lifetime membership, and I haven't looked back since.
Oh, that's so amazing, Sandy. That's so cool. Like, it just shows the power of, if you find a tool or something that you just really jive with, it can turn things around immediately. It really can bring new life for you as a web designer and as a creative. I just talked with Dave Foy, who I think will be the episode before this one, and he is a bricks guy, and he just fell in love with bricks, and the way he talked about bricks reminded me of how I felt about Divi and how you felt about that. It's like, oh my gosh, the sky is the limit, especially like you said, back in 2016, I don't even think Elementor existed yet. I could be wrong. There's a few other ones that may have been in their infancy, but Divi was really like the first visual page builder that took off. The ones previous to that were rough. There was like Visual Composer, which was a builder, but it was janky. Yeah. So I agree. It was very similar. I mean, I remember tinkering around with ThemeForce themes and just being so frustrated at doing that. And then finally, when Divi came around and I started enjoying it, I did not look back from there. So it's so cool to see that. I mean, Elegant Themes needs to hear about this. You're probably going to get a call from them to be their success story, because what a testament. Like, you almost gave web design up, and then Divi saved you. That needs
Divi
to be the title.
saved my business 100%. It did. So yeah. And like I said, so from then it's really funny, because what happened was, so I got Divi and I started, doing websites and that. And then of course I was able to do websites quicker. And then as I got them done quicker, my business started to get busier. So it's kind of like it went hand in hand. As I got my tools in place and I got better at what I was doing, I got more clients and things started to pick up.
That's a good point too. I love that you said that, because clients can sense whether you are enjoying what you do. Like, if you go into a meeting and you're pumped about talking about the design and what you could do, and you show them things, that's contagious in the best of ways. Whereas if you're super stressed out and you hate the tools that you use, and they can just sense like, this person is burned out. Are they really, like, is the success of my business going to be with this person? That comes through when you're selling and when you're meeting people. So I'm sure that was contagious for people to see like your new fire for Divi and websites and your business.
I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, because they really do. I mean, and it doesn't, even if you had a pretty good face, like a poker face, clients, they can sense it. Just like we smell, we can sense bullshit a mile away now. It's the same thing. They can also sense your energy and how you're really feeling about stuff. And I found that with sales, like, what the big shift for me personally this year was with Web Designer Pro. That became the main thing for me versus my one-off courses. And then I think people could sense, like, as I talk about my one-off courses, like, yeah, you can go that route, but I want you to come into Pro, because that's where you're going to get the results. So I've noticed like my students sensing that too. So I think the same thing in sales as well. Now, speaking of me, I can't help but bring up one of the funniest, greatest things you told me in person, which was that you could not stand me the first time you saw me. I'm calling us out on this, because I just know you as, like, the first time we met, you were a super fan basically with the Divi resources. So I didn't know that initially you didn't feel that way. So I am totally open, Sandy, to hearing how you found me and then what your initial take was.
Oh my God. Well, I wouldn't say that I couldn't stand you. What it was, oh my God. What it was that, okay, so I was learning Divi, right? So now we're early 2016. Yeah. So I'm learning Divi, I'm figuring things out. And then of course, as I'm, doing client sites, I'm like, okay, how do I do this in Divi? How do I do that? And so I would Google it, and then your face would show up at the top of all these searches. And no, this is before I understood about familiarity and, putting your face on things to get that recognition and all that stuff. So my sort of reaction to that was, who the heck does this guy think he is, putting his face on all these things?
Yeah.
I thought it was a little bit, I don't know, almost narcissistic in a way. It was just like, geez, you just want your shining mug on everything. You're like, oh my God.
Right.
So I was avoiding your videos for a bit because of that. And then finally I came across something where it's like, well, I've got to watch his video because nobody else is answering this question. And then so I watched it and I'm like, oh my God, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. And not only that, but you got to the point really quickly. So you answered the question rather than going through, I'm Josh and this is all about me and, all this kind of stuff. Like, you were just very succinct that way. And I really appreciated that. So then after that, I actually searched out your videos, and then from there found out about your Facebook group and then joined that. And then from there found out about your maintenance plan course. And, it just kind of evolved after that.
Oh, it's such a great story, just because it's funny. It comes by nature with having a personal brand too sometimes, but my face is all over my website still. But the reason, and for anyone who does something like I do with any sort of education, or even for web designers making like training videos and stuff, that point is so funny because it does look super douchey to have your face on everything. But what I recognize and what I learned early on was, like, if somebody random sees a video and then there's just a bunch of options to choose from on YouTube, but there's one with somebody, like smiling, like this is who you're going to learn from, you're much you're much more likely to get a click on that video. That's what I learned. So while, on my website, it totally looks like Josh's head. It's more about like the legs that grow on the other places of the internet. So it's so funny. But to that point, I mean, there's plenty of marketers that I've learned from who I was like, oh, this person again, or I just don't jive with this style. But then when you do really get to know their stuff, you end up finding out like, it's kind of, some of that stuff is just a way to get somebody through the door. I just love that point. That was so funny because I was like, I totally get it. Like I was not offended by that at all because I could totally, I have my face on my microphone still, but it's because it's the logo of the podcast. But so needless to say, what an honor it's been to have come into your journey at that point, because it sounds like the Divi resources that I put out in the early days help you with learning Divi, but then you become a business owner because you're already maybe 4 or 5, or I guess by the time you joined my courses, you were about 5 years into your journey.
Yeah.
So what was that like? I imagine you get to a place where you're pretty good at building websites, but what made you take seriously the business side of your business?
Honestly, I mean, so even in 2016, 2017, as my business was getting busier and busier, I was still very much in the freelance mindset, right? So it was still, you've admitted to doing this too, so I'll confess as well. I was doing invoices by PDF, designing them individually. Like, I didn't have all the business stuff in place, right? Like, and the SOPs and all that kind of stuff. So it was still just sort of on a client by client, taking everything as it comes kind of thing, and just getting busier and trying to, still fumble my way through, but at least now I had my tools in place. And the thing about Divi too was that, in addition to your tutorials and all these other things you can do with it, there was this growing number of third-party plugins that you could buy and utilize in the Divi theme. And it was just, so when I started coming across those, it was like, okay, wow, this is amazing. I can take what's already super amazing and build on that,
And then, so you're building, did you start like raising your rates? Because I imagine, like you said, you're getting quicker, you're building better and better websites. What was the business side of things like then? I guess I'm kind of curious, like when did you become a serious, business owner with your business?
I'm trying to remember now, because I mean, the biggest shift happened when I started scaling, but we'll get to that. I started raising my rates, I want to say 2017. I'm not sure exactly. Okay. I work really closely with this guy in Ottawa who does Google ads and that kind of thing. And he sent me a lot of work, and he kept saying, Sandy, you need to raise your rates. Like, oh my God, you're pricing yourself way too low. So it's like, okay, fine, I will raise my rates.
How often have you heard that the past few years?
From you, just about every time we talk. But it's true. I mean, I was pricing myself far too low, but it was still part of that imposter syndrome of like, well, who's going to pay me more when I'm still learning and figuring things out? Even though I was getting better, I still didn't feel like 100% like a business owner, and I wasn't taking it 100% seriously. Like I took this really, really slowly, like getting into that business mindset.
And did you have a maintenance plan or any sort of recurring income before going
Not
through?
at that time, no.
Okay. So yeah, because I look back, I was trying to remember what course you joined first, and it was my maintenance plan course. So you started building maintenance, building recurring income. And then, I mean, what's really cool about Web Designer Pro and having a community is now I'm able to like communicate with you and others in the community and actually track your progress and see how things are going. Whereas back in those days, I saw your name come through, but I didn't know who Sandy was, or I mean, I did recognize you in the Facebook group, so that was a little bit different. But in most cases, I'm like, I have no idea how are things going, where your business is, what's going on. So I really didn't know where you were in your business until I started the membership, and then you were an early adopter. That you were one of the founding members. And so that's when I really saw you take those strides. And even since then, Sandy, my goodness, I mean, we'll get to this, but yeah, you're scaling. You're at a place where you admittedly said before we started recording, you're so busy that you almost don't want to make your website more conversion because you got to figure out how to take it on right now. What an amazing place to be in. And yeah, you're 10 years into it and you've been working at this every week, every month for years. But you really got your business to a place where it was like sustainable, especially with recurring income and all that. So did you do anything different in the way of services other than websites and maintenance during those years between like the 17, 18, 19, 2020 timeframe? Or did you just focus on websites and maintenance?
Earlier on in the first few years, and I can't remember when I stopped this, but I wasn't calling it graphic design because I'm not trained as a graphic designer per se. I was calling it print design, and I was doing things like postcards and posters and stuff like that. But it became something like with your story where it was too much and it just wasn't what I wanted to do. I really wanted to focus on the websites, especially after I found Divi. Mm-hmm. So I dropped that, and I can't remember what year I dropped that, but it was, I want to say 2017 or 2018. I'm not sure. And then, yeah, it was, I guess it was 2019 that I got into the maintenance, right? Because that's when I took your course.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Beginning of 19. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that must have been when I started, with hosting and maintenance. So, I started offering hosting with this, internet company in Ottawa that, they're an internet service provider, but they also do hosting. And a guy who works there, he's a friend of mine. He's been there for years. So he kept encouraging me like, hey, Sandy, you should really set up a server with us and start hosting. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for that. And then I took your course and I'm like, okay, let's do this, and then just side note from that, my main contact for the hosting, is, like he was my main contact for the first couple of years. And then he's now my boyfriend. So
no kidding.
Yeah. So he manages my server for me, and he really helps me a lot with all of that side.
You knew automatically he's a patient guy if he deals with databases and SQL stuff, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, he's
good.
Definitely got a lot of
That's a good boyfriend character. There we go. Developers and if you can find an email deliverability expert, you're never gonna find somebody more patient and chill than that.
Oh, absolutely. Every time I have a client question, like a client asks me about email stuff, it's like, go ask him. I'll just put them in touch with him because like I don't know, I don't know enough about the email stuff, but he's really good at helping with that. And that was 4 years ago that we started dating. So it's been a while now that, that he's been helping me with all this stuff.
Oh, that's so cool. And then before we get to a couple big points in your journey, one thing I did want to hone in on that I almost forgot about, but I wanted to dive into this is that person you mentioned, the Google Ads guy.
Yep.
Where did you, because you said he was a big time referral source for you. I was curious about where you're getting a lot of your clients. For him personally, like, did you guys meet at a networking group or a workshop or a meetup, or how did you make that connection?
Ottawa WordCamp.
Okay.
We actually, I think it was last year, we tried to remember what year it was that we met. I want to say it was 2015 or 2016. It was one of those two. But anyway, he did a talk about Google Ads and I went to see that, or no, actually, sorry, it was the analytics and I went to watch it. And then I went up to him afterwards and asked him a couple of questions and he asked me, what do you do? And we got chatting and I gave him my business card. And then a couple of weeks later, he called me and he said, hey, could you help me with, some website stuff and some editing? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And then from there, it's just kind of evolved and, he sends me a ton of work. But honestly, the bulk of my clients come through referrals because again, I live in a really, really small town. So people talk, right? So like, I'll do a website for this person. And I've literally seen, I got your name from so-and-so. And then the next person, I got your name from this person who had already gotten my name from this person. It's like this referral train is just, it goes strong in small communities.
It's such a beautiful model. And I know it fits your style too. Like I know you prefer to be more personable and one-on-one. And because most of your clients are local, right? Or have you worked with people abroad or elsewhere?
I do have clients in other parts of Canada and the US, but yeah, I would say the majority of them are local. And I love that because, I get to visit them in person a lot of the time and really get to know them and their business. And yeah, it's like you said, I mean, that's how I've always wanted to run my business was just that personal touch,
Yeah. I love that you're building your business your way and that you're running your business your way and scaling your way, which sounds like a good course name coming up. But one thing I did want to highlight there, this is very timely because we just recently had on Anchin, who is the co-host of the Page Builder Summit, who's a new member of Web Designer Pro. And something she shared about her journey as a professional web designer is her marketing strategy for getting clients was largely meetups in WordPress groups. So you would think, well, why would I go to a WordPress meetup with other web designers? How's that going to lead to clients? Sandy, what you just said is exactly it. You meet with somebody who does something that can help you and you can help them, and they become a referral source. So everyone listening to this, I don't want us to miss over how important this is as far as a lead strategy. And I cover this in the business course, but it's great to pull out in this circumstance, which is when you want to find leads and get clients, go to WordPress groups if you're a WordPresser, or go to web design meetups. Those people become referral sources too. So I love that. I mean, this is just a case study, like a prime example of that actually working. And I'm sure you didn't meet him and think, okay, here's a guy who could be my referral source. No, you just, good complementary services. Next thing you know, you're both helping each other out and you're getting leads from it. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. It's such an important tip for getting clients that most people don't think about.
Absolutely. Because I mean, my reason for going up to him was just to ask him a couple of questions, right? And then we just got chatting after that. But that's a really good point because not everybody who's at WordCamps and meetup, are other web designers who are looking for the same thing you are. A lot of them are people who are doing different things that complement the web design realm kind of thing, right? So he does analytics and Google Ads and that kind of thing. And that's separate from what I do, but it's complementary in that we can refer work to each other, and that's a big part of it too. I find that networking and just kind of getting people in your circle who have complementary services and then they become referral partners. I mean, that's a huge way to it's a very good way to grow your business and get new clients. I also work really closely with a local graphic designer who is absolutely incredible. She did my logo a few years ago, but she used to do websites and she decided to get out of it. So I got all of her website clients and I've been sending a lot of my clients to her for graphic work.
And very timely after you got out of doing graphic and print work. So
exactly. Yeah. And it actually coincided. It was the same time. It's like, well, now that I'm working with a graphic designer, I don't need to do this stuff anymore. I don't like it anyway. So
in my networking group, we had what was called core groups, which was basically a level back from the networking group as a whole, meaning like our networking group was people in different industries. So they were realtors and insurance agents. And they may refer people to me, but they're not going to they're not going to be a partner style relationship. Whereas my video guy was in there. My SEO guy who ended up doing a lot of SEO work for me, he was in there. We had a graphic designer and digital marketer at one point. They were all very similar to web design services in the way of like referrals, because if somebody goes to an insurance agent, they may not be like, hey, I need a website too. They're like, that's unrelated, but if somebody gets a video done and they're like, okay, we want to put our video on our website. And then the video guy's like, oh, you should talk to my web guy, Josh. He's awesome. That's what really helped grow my business too within the networking group. So that sounds very similar. It's like that core group idea of, like you said, people who have ancillary services. So yet another great tactic that works. It has worked for years. It works right now, and it will continue to work for a very long time. So I love that approach. So I've seen your business do like leaps and bounds since joining what it was formerly the club. Now it's Web Designer Pro. Mm-hmm. So that was really cool. And then I remember you were very, very resistant to the idea of scaling. And I understand, like, and this is the creative's curse because you feel proud of your work. And I remember you and I talking about this, like, how do I trust somebody else to do work when it's my company, my name's on it. And I kind of gave you, I think I almost gave you like a heads up. Like I'm pretty sure with your trajectory, you are going to need to scale unless you're going to work 90 hours a week or you really, really raise your rates and go super premium. So you had, I think, just started scaling, and then life, really took a wild turn for you. Whatever you feel like sharing on that, Sandy, totally open to your journey. But yeah, what happened basically when you started scaling and the business grew?
I'm an open book when it comes to everything that I've gone through here. So you can ask me anything about that. Do you want to start with the scaling and my hesitation for that? And
because I think that led right into your cancer story. So yeah,
exactly. So, things were getting busier and busier and busier. And I consistently had at least a dozen or more website projects on my plate at any given time, in addition to a whole bunch of client work and, all that kind of stuff. And so I started 2021 already behind in, with projects that I had hoped to get done the year before and just didn't happen. And then I think it was July of 2021 whenever I reached out to you in the pro there and asked, like, okay, so tell me again, what was the reason why you finally decided to start scaling? Because I had a feeling you were going to tell me, oh my God, you need to start scaling. But I guess I kind of needed to hear it over and over because I knew that I needed to, but at the same time, I really, really, really didn't want to, So you had me on a couple of hot seats and I asked you some questions but again, like I take things fairly slowly, especially when it comes to like a huge shift like this. So it took me, the rest of that year to I was going back and forth. Like one day I'd be like, okay, this is it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to start scaling. And then the next day I was like, no, I got this. I don't need to scale. I can totally manage this on my own. And then what ended up being the catalyst for me was a couple days before Christmas of 2021. I already had a full plate, right? I had all these website projects on my plate. I had all this other stuff to do. And then I had sent out a proposal for a fairly large site and I got a yes on it. And I'm like, yay. How am I going to do this?
Yeah.
And then I think it was the next day or the day after, a client that I had done his website a few years ago emailed me, and he runs a retirement center. And he's like, hey, Sandy, just giving you a heads up that I'm going to be opening a second location. So I'm going to need a website for that next year. And I'm going to need a website for the parent brand. And so it's like, okay, 3 websites on top of everything else in the span of a couple of days. I can't do this on my own anymore. Like that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Like it's just, I need to scale. I can't keep flip-flopping on this.
So you, like me, were forced into it because I remember very vividly having like 23 projects in Basecamp, and I'm like, and my daughter was just about to be born. I was like, okay, I literally can't. Unless I like turn my business off and work 100 hours a week. So I gave you some tips on that, which so timely because I'm working on my scaling course, which I'm super excited. I mean, really, like your situation is a case study of how to scale your way. What did you do at first, though? Because that's the question. Is like, okay, do I like get an office and hire? And obviously we know that's not the way you have to go. But what did you do? What were the first steps that worked for you with scaling?
Well, Honestly, the very first step, and you talked about this. Sorry, if you hear noise in the background, my cat is very squeaky.
Oh, that's right. We've had a lot of puppies and cats on recently. So
Yeah, he likes to come in sometimes and just meow at me, and he's doing that now. So I apologize for the noise in the background.
that's all right.
But yeah, so the very first step in all of this, and you talked about this a lot whenever we first started talking about it, was the mindset shift. Because before I could even start looking for designers, I needed to get myself into the right mindset, away from the freelance sort of mindset of it and into the, taking my business seriously and growing it and, looking at things differently that way, By this point I had, an invoicing system and all that, but I still didn't have all my SOPs in place. I still did, I had my web design process because I had taken your process course and I had, taken that and altered it. So that was essentially the only SOP that I had.
Gotcha.
But I really had to adjust how I looked at my business and how I was approaching everything, not only from my perspective, but looking at it from how my clients would view it as well. And I had a lot of concerns, as you know, and some of them were, looking back now, I realized these were obstacles that I was putting in my own way. Things like, it sounds stupid now, but I had myself convinced that it was a one-way street, that if I start scaling, I could never go back to being a freelancer, which is ridiculous. It's my business. I can do what I want, But now that I've scaled, I don't want to go back to being a freelancer. It's actually working out well, but we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
One of the other concerns that I had is just like what you mentioned a second ago, where my clients are reaching out to me. They want me, they want to work with me, right? And especially being in a small town, they know me or they know somebody who's worked with me already. So I was really, really concerned about what are they going to say and how are they going to react when I tell them, okay, I'm going to get my designer to work on this for you, And so at first, I hid that from them. I just kind of pretended that I was doing the work. But then when life took a turn, like what we're going to talk about, I made my designer's client facing, and it's actually worked out extremely well. And none of my clients have even flinched at, being told, oh yeah, my designer is going to be working on this for you,
It's amazing. Yeah. And I honestly think that's a fine way to go, especially initially, like when you are bringing new people into a business, even if it's just occasionally one page on a website. I do recommend, and it's what I did as well, that you're still the person, but you get work done. Like, clients don't care if the work gets done and it gets done faster, sooner than expected. Awesome. It's a win-win.
And that's what they care about.
Yeah. They care about speed. They don't care about how many hours you personally are working. And if you tell yourself, or your client, I killed myself on this site, worked 80 hours, they don't care. I mean, they care in some way, but if you're like, yeah, we got this done, really quick, they're like, that's awesome. I don't, that's what I want to hear. So Exactly. It's a great way to go. The lesson there is, be the client facing person at first, especially, but start to chip away at getting those things done. And then, as you find somebody who can communicate well and you feel like, okay, they could talk to a client and they already know your style and they're a different person than you, but they know the mission and vision of the brand. That's when they can start talking client facing as well. And then they can just kind of go from there. But you did it right, Sandy. You started small. What did you practically do? Were you hiring, or were you offloading and delegating parts of website builds or whole website builds?
So after we did the hot seats in Web Designer Pro, a few people in the club there reached out by private message and just said, hey, if you're looking for subcontractors, I'd love to help you out. I'd love to work with you. So I started contacting a few of those people in January and just saying okay, I'm ready, and I'd get on a call with them and just kind of get to know them a little bit. And then, obviously look at their websites, look at their portfolio, because it was important to me that whoever I worked with had a similar design style to me, so that, it was going to enhance my, the work that my business was doing and not alter it drastically,
That's great.
I started working with a couple of people in the spring, and then, I think it was May, I got that 5-figure website. So I brought Abby on from the club to help me out with that. and it's turned into a bit of a nightmare. It's still going on. Don't even ask me about it. But so I brought her on, and she helped me out with a few other things too. She's been great. But what really changed everything was when Alexis from the club reached out, and I'll just say this right now. The reason I hired from the club was because the great thing about Web Designer Pro is that when you're in there and you're reading people's posts, you can really get a sense of who they are, as a person, their personality, where they are in their journey based on like what they're helping other people with and what questions they're asking and that kind of stuff. So, when people were reaching out to me, I already kind of had an idea of who they were and who I felt like I could work with and that kind of thing. Because that was part of it too. Like I wanted to make sure that I could actually work with this person, So yeah, Alexis reached out in, I want to say March of that year. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. Because I just had a feeling we would get along.
Yeah.
And as you saw at WordCamp, like we are awesome friends now. She's amazing, inside and out. She's just,
I was going to say, who wouldn't love working with Alexis? She's just like a warm spirit. Yeah,
exactly.
Like you can't be in a bad mood hanging out with Alexis.
No, exactly. She honestly, we get on Zoom calls and we purposely, add like half an hour or whatever, just for chit chat, because we just, because we know that we got to like just chat for a little bit and laugh about stuff before we can talk about the business stuff. So no, she's been really great to work with. So yeah, what it looked like, it's so funny because it's kind of one of these, what I had in mind, the plan that I had did not, is not how it worked out. Because when I brought Alexis on and I had her, sign the NDA and, I'm like, okay, I've got all these websites on my plate. I'm like, when I get this particular, it was a bed and breakfast website that I really wanted her to start on. And I said, okay, when I get the homepage done, because it was like 3/4 of the way done, and get an inside page done, I'll pass it off to you and you can finish it off for me. She's like, okay, sounds good. So then about 3 weeks later, this client, the bed and breakfast client, is like, hey, how's it going with my website? I hadn't been able to even touch it because I've been so busy with all these other things. So I said to Alexis, okay, I hate to do this to you, but can you just pick up from where I'm at with the homepage 3/4 of the way done and just take it from there? And so she's like, yeah, of course. So we got on a Zoom call. I explained all about this client because it's kind of a unique setting. And, and then she took it. And I think it was a week or so later, she sent me a Zoom video of going through, not Zoom video, sorry, a Loom video of everything that she had done on the web, on the homepage. And it's like, okay, I added this because I noticed you did this and blah, 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 and she had some suggestions and stuff. And I'm sitting there and I was just blown away. And that was the first time I realized, okay, this scaling thing is going to work, and then after that, it was like, okay, like her design style complements mine so well, but that was the first website that we collaborated on. So she sent me that video and then I sent her, some messages back saying, okay, this looks great. What if we do this and this on this section? And then she did that. And then that made the website design that much better. And that was when we realized, okay, when we work together, the designs, like it takes it from the level that I was at and just ups the quality of the work that my business was putting out, essentially.
Yeah.
And
I mean, gosh, it's such a great testament to scaling, but you didn't do it at a stressful level. It was low risk at first, but you get to a point where, you can have somebody else put their flair on a project and their skill set. And I imagine there's things that Alexis does better than you and that you do better than her. And it works out. It evens out really well. I think most importantly, though, aside from the mindset change, which is phase one for sure, like you mentioned, phase two is kind of like the tactile stuff getting going. But what I've found in my journey with scaling, and I'm curious if you felt this too, is business feels different when you're not alone.
yes.
Do you feel that? Do you feel that too? When suddenly like, wow, it's not all on my shoulders now. I have help.
100%. And that's one thing that I didn't expect. It sounds silly, but, it was just like up until that point, like I said, I was a freelancer. I was doing this alone. And I thought that I would be perfectly happy just working for myself, by myself for my entire, web design career basically. But then when I was forced to scale and I started working, especially with Alexis, like I had a couple other designers too, but I'm really going to hone on Alexis because she's like my main one now. That was when I told her this so many times too, is that how do I put this? It's so nice to not be alone anymore. It's so nice to be able to bounce things off of somebody else who is also a designer, who understands all of the ins and outs of putting together a website. And we'll bounce things off of each other when it comes to, what font do you think I should use? Or do these colors work? Or, she'll ask me opinions on websites that she's doing for her own clients. And I'll ask her for, her opinion on stuff that I'm not having her work on, but just to bounce it off of somebody else, and, and obviously the websites that she does for me that we're both working on together are, they're so much better than I ever could have done alone, because she's an amazing designer. But she, like you said, brings a flair that there's things that she'll do in her designs that I'm like, that's brilliant. Why didn't I think of this?
Yeah. I found that too with Jonathan, who was my lead designer back then. Yeah, he would do some stuff. I'm like, oh, how the heck did I not think about that? That's great. And then he ended up exceeding me on the design front. And then I just started, and you'll probably get to this point if you're not already there, where it's like, yeah, I'm just going to let them do the design fully. You get to, the trust gets there. And once they know your systems and processes and styles, it's like, unless you still want to be the creative director, which that's the beautiful thing about scaling now, you could do it whatever you want to do. Like if you still want to be in the weeds, or if you want to design the homepage, but then somebody else does the rest of the website, that's a great way to go. So it's so cool, Sandy, seeing you as a fan of scaling, just because you're you're like a parallel version of me, where you were really hesitant to scale. You liked being a soloist. You liked being a freelancer. It was business is personal because it's your thing. But yeah, you get overwhelmed. But then suddenly, once you scale, and look, not all scaling is rainbow and butterflies. Like I know you've had a couple situations where it is tricky sometimes, where either things don't work out or projects delay, or you get used to being like managing people in some way. But man, it's awesome. I mean, how has it helped you? I guess kind of a two-part question. I was wondering how it's helped you with time to be able to grow your business and focus on, I'm sure the next thing we'll dive into is your cancer story. But also, before we get to that, your bandwidth, how has it helped? Has it helped you feel like like your mental bandwidth, your load? Has it helped out with that?
Absolutely. Because, at this point, and I really didn't think I'd be reaching the point as quickly as I did that you just talked about, where I've got Alexis doing entire websites for me. I truly thought that for the first few years it was going to be, I'll start the site and then you just pick up where I leave off kind of thing. But no, she's done several complete website builds for me now. And, it's been great. And the clients are super impressed and everything too. And of course I have her client facing now, but we'll get into that in a second. Yeah. But yeah, in terms of bandwidth, so before I started scaling, when I was first reaching out to you, it was a case where I was actually starting to tell clients, okay, I can't, I didn't word it like this. So basically I said that I have a waiting list, and that I won't be able to get to this until, a couple months down the road kind of thing, just because I'm so swamped. And, there's a few clients who are like, well, I kind of want it quicker than that, so now I don't have to worry about, saying no to clients, because now it's like, okay, Alexis, what do you have on your plate? Can you take on another one right now? Because projects can essentially get done twice as fast because there's two people working on them,
Good point. Yeah, that is something that you almost don't factor in initially with scaling. Is it's like, yeah, you might be taking less of a cut of the project, but if you raise your rates accordingly, you can still make a lot of profit, but also you can take way more on if you want to, and still have bandwidth because you're able to. Instead of doing 100 hours on a project yourself, you might do 30 and then, or whatever it is. I mean, that's a big project, but even if it's like 30 hours on a project, you could do 10 instead of 30. Imagine that. You could take on way more in a week doing 10 hours on a project than 30. So
absolutely.
Oh, it's so cool. So cancer, this is where what was so wild about this was, it's like, I remember, probably too early to tell you this, but I think I was like, thank goodness you scaled. Cause what if you hadn't? I mean, I know we talked about that in pro, but yeah, take us through that diagnosis. And I mean, I know cancer happens fast. This is timely for me. My aunt actually just passed away recently. Like, I know life changes so fast when that happens.
I'm so sorry, Josh.
Well, her battle was a few years. So it was kind of expected, but it does seem like, and even like a close friend of mine, Jason Gracia, who's coming back up on the podcast, I'm in a mastermind with him. He has a wild cancer story and he's a survivor just like you. But the point is, no matter what it is, even with what I've been through with my daughter, any sort of health issues or medical issues, they come fast, and you almost need to be somewhat prepared for if something happens, if I need to take a month or 2 or 3 completely off or largely off, what's the plan of action? So thank goodness you scaled. Yeah. Would you mind just sharing? Yeah. What happened?
Exactly. So, so I started scaling, like I said, at the beginning of 2022. No, when was it now?
I think 22, right? Yeah, I think 22.
Yes, that's right.
22 is when you just started scaling, I believe. And then, because it was pretty early on in 22.
It was. Yeah. So, okay. I asked you beforehand if I could do a little PSA about how the diagnosis came about. So still good to do that?
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
Okay. So, as women, we are trained to look for a lump. Okay. So by definition, this is something small, round, hard, with clearly defined edges. What I found was not a lump. What I found was really just a mass of tissue that was denser than the rest. Okay. And because it didn't fit the definition of what we were trained to look for, it didn't ring any alarm bells when I first came across this. So I don't know whether it was months or a year or more. Like, I honestly can't remember when I first found it because it didn't register as anything to be worried about. So in July of 2022, I noticed that this massive dense tissue was significantly larger than it had been before. It was like it was probably at least half my breast at that point. And it was on the left side. And I thought, I'm taking my daughter to the doctor anyway. I might as well ask her about this while I'm there. So doctor examined me. She's like, well, it's probably nothing, but I'll send you for a mammogram just in case. And I should mention too that there's no breast cancer in my family whatsoever. And I was 44 at the time. And in Ontario, the annual screenings don't start until 50. Now they've recently just changed that. They're going to change that for next year. They just came out with that announcement a couple of weeks ago, but that they're changing it to 40. But at the time, the screenings didn't start till 50. So I wasn't on the radar at all for any kind of breast cancer. So I had it wasn't even on my mind. Okay. So I'm like, okay, go for the mammogram, turned into about 20, and then cross the hall for an ultrasound. Oh, your lymph nodes are swollen. We're going to send you to Ottawa for a biopsy, because I was getting the mammograms done at my local hospital here. So I went to Ottawa, got the biopsy done, and again, wasn't thinking anything was wrong. Right. And then they call me up and they're like, okay, I want you to come in for an MRI. I'm like, wow, you guys are being very thorough. Okay, sure. So I go in for an MRI, and I got registered, and the guy asked me, have you signed up for MyChart? And that's an online patient portal. And I said, no, not yet. And he's like, okay, well, I'll send you the email with the link and you can set it up. So I'm sitting there in the waiting room, and I create my account and I log into the portal for the first time. And I'm like, okay, you can see, upcoming visits, this and that. You see where this is going.
I know.
You can see test results
so well with my daughter, Bria. Yeah. It's like, the dread of the test results. Oh.
So I'm like, test results. Interesting. Okay. Oh, there's the test results of my biopsy. What's metastatic carcinoma? So I Googled it.
Oh no.
Cancer. I'm like, oh my God, I have breast cancer. And that's how I found out.
So you didn't know, a doctor didn't call you first? You found out?
So the MRI was on a Wednesday night at the end of August. And the following Tuesday was when I had an appointment with my surgeon. And that's when I was supposed to be told you have breast cancer. So I found out in the waiting room of, for my MRI, but at the time, it was devastating, obviously, because nobody wants to find out that they have cancer, especially when it's not even remotely on the radar. But, in hindsight, it actually ended up being a bit of a silver lining to find out that way, because by the time I went to see my surgeon the following week, I had had the better part of a week to kind of reel from this,
like process it
and process it
Yeah.
and come up with my questions for her. So when she came in the room, the first thing I said to her was, I know it's cancer. And she said, okay, good. Because normally when I say that word, people just tune out. And it's like, okay. So instead we were able to have a good conversation and ask her a bunch of questions and figure out the game plan. Like, okay, what happens now?
Wow. Gosh. Yeah. And I remember, I think you messaged me in Pro like the day of or day after, maybe.
Yeah.
It was really early. And then, I didn't know what to say. I was just like, oh my gosh, Sam, I'm so sorry. Keep me posted. Anything we can do to help. And I think I even said, like, thank goodness you got some help at this point so you can focus on this and the business can keep chugging along. So I don't want to the thing is, I didn't want to take this right back to business, but it's such an important thing because now suddenly you're trying to run your business and deal with this diagnosis. And then who knows what's next. What did you do at this point? Did you let Alexis know? And we could talk about the client side of things too. Like, what was the game plan for the business when all this went down?
So yeah, and I thought a lot about that. So one of the first things I did was I got onto a Zoom call with Alexis and the other two designers that I was working with, and told them what was going on. And I said, I need you guys more than ever. And they're like, we're here for you, whatever you need. And then Alexis messaged me afterwards and she said, hey, just so you know, I have a background as a VA. So if you need anything on the administrative side with, client facing stuff, I can do this for you. And I'm like, oh my God, I hadn't even thought about that, because, for the first few weeks or so after I found out, your headspace just goes into a totally different zone, right? Like you can't think straight. You're just, I swear I probably cried nonstop for 3 weeks. Like it was just, you know what I mean? Like you have to go through this whole process, right? And so I hadn't even thought about very much on the business side and the client side. So when she said that, I'm like, yeah, you know what? That would be really helpful. Okay, let's talk about this. So we got on another Zoom call, just her and I, and sort of worked out like, okay, what could she do and what would I need and how would this work and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of set it up on a monthly retainer kind of thing. So I was paying her for a certain number of hours every month, and then she would, handle some client work, handle emails, like whatever I needed, basically. Like I was still sort of the front line, but anything that I couldn't handle or I couldn't put my mind into it or whatever, I would just forward to her and she would manage it, And then as far as the clients go, that's why I actually posted in Pro. And I think I asked you privately as well, like, okay, how do I handle this? Do I tell the clients or do I hide this from them?
Right.
Because I'd never dealt with something like this before. I didn't know what to do. So you and everybody in Pro was like, yeah, be open about this. It's going to be fine. So I did. I sent out a MailChimp newsletter to my best clients. Like I just kind of selected the ones that I wanted to share this with off the top. Like,
and probably the ones you're working with currently, and
the ones I was working with currently, and the A clients essentially, right? And just said, okay, this is what's going on. And I sent it at like 9:00 at night, and within minutes, several of my clients emailed me back and said, oh my God, I'm so sorry to hear this. Let me know what you need, all this kind of stuff. The client I mentioned earlier who, excuse me, who has a retirement home, he's a doctor. And so he emailed me and he's like, if you ever have any questions throughout this whole thing, or any weird symptoms that you want to, get some feedback on or whatever, like, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm like, wow. Oh my God, like I've got the best clients, so they were amazing. And then, so then as other clients sort of came up over the next few months and who didn't know what was going on, and I was open and honest with them, and they were like, same thing, oh my God, I'm so sorry. But part of it too was that I was in that email and in all of my dealings with the clients, I kept reiterating, I have a designer who I'm working with. She's going to take care of things. Your work is not going to be put on hold. Like, things are still going to get done. The maintenance is still going to get done.
Right.
All of this stuff. So knowing, like, when they knew that they were going to be taken care of, then they reacted appropriately that way. Like, they were much more likely to be, very helpful and patient and all that stuff.
Yeah. And I think most clients, even if just for a pure soloist or freelancer, most clients are going to be understanding. But if you have a business to run and your website is a big part of that business, at some point it's got to keep running. Stuff needs done. So that's where the best circumstance is what you have, which is a team in place behind you. The next best is like a community behind you that you could quickly have somebody to help out, but then you're trying to scale and teach somebody while you're going through a health situation. So it's just such an amazing testament, Sandy, to where you were even early on with scaling. Alexis and Abby, and I think Justin too at one point, right? I think it was all pro members, right?
Yeah, all of them pro members, yeah.
So yeah, you already had that level of trust and all that in there while you went through this. And I agree. I think letting clients know and just being totally transparent. Number one, people are people. Most everyone's going to be understanding of that, and they'll work with you. And if there's a team to support them, it's all good. I experienced that when Bria, when she was born and was in the NICU for 56 days, like, caught us by complete surprise, that length of stay. And I found it incredibly hard to work. I was working at coffee shop across from the hospital as much as I could. And I just told all my clients what's going on, giving them updates. One situation, I don't know if you know this or if I talked about this, but one situation was borderline awkward because it was the biggest project I'd ever done at $15K. And we had just started. I got the deposit right before Bria was born. And then everything happened, and we were like a month delayed on even the version 1 of the project. And I just told him, like, he was a really great guy, really great client. And I just let him know what was happening. I showed him a picture of Bria. We met at a coffee shop. And I said, listen, I'm so sorry. I said, we're still in the thick of it, but I've got some subcontractors. We're making this a priority now, and I'm going to do what I can. And he was really cool. And he was cool with things being delayed. It was something where, like, yeah, they wanted to get the website going, but they even paid the second installment before I had barely anything done on the next iteration. They just knew the situation was real for me and my family. And another testament to just an amazing client. Like, they did not have to pay me an additional, because I did $5,000 up front, 5 in the middle, and 5 at the end. And he paid me $10,000 within 2 months of starting, barely having any progress. And that really helped us during that time, along with the maintenance plan, with me and my family, going through that. Anyway, I say that to say, tell your clients if you're going through something. Most people will be cool, and better yet, if you can have somebody behind you to help, you're good. You're really good from there. But then for you, you go through all your treatment. So what did the next phase of your cancer story look like as you're scaling and running your business?
Okay. So, and I mean, you made a really good point there. And that's why, going back to what we talked about before with me running my business in a very personal, one-on-one kind of way with my clients, because, having that relationship in place was crucial to, when I shared this with them, that, they already knew that I cared about them, that I had that relationship, that trust built up. So when I told them this, they're like, oh my God, take all the time you need, we're good, kind of thing. Right. So basically, about 3 weeks or so after I met with the surgeon, it was a couple of weeks and I met my oncologist, and then the week after I started chemo. And I had 8 rounds of chemo. So that took me through the fall, and the last round was at the beginning of January of this year. And throughout all of that, I basically put Alexis client facing on nearly all of my websites at that point. I'm I was still doing what I could, but it was really important to me that I was able to just step away from the business after each round of chemo and just take the time that I needed to focus on feeling better,
Sure. Yeah.
Because chemo knocks everything out of you. It's really, really difficult. I say that it was actually easier than I expected, but I was expecting to be, sick with flu-like symptoms kind of thing for 4 months straight. And that wasn't the case, but it was, after each round, it was like 3 or 4 days of, nausea and brain fog and fatigue and everything else. But then after that, I would start to feel a little bit better. And then I would have about a week or so in between each treatment, because they were every 2 weeks, where I felt better enough that I could actually work. So that's when I would say to my designers, okay, I'm at my desk today. What do you guys need? Do you need any help? Do you have any questions? All that kind of stuff. So they got used to just kind of watching for me to be ready to, to help them out and that kind of thing. And then, and I would do what I can, but yeah, they were, especially Alexis, like they were absolutely instrumental in keeping my business going through all of this.
Gosh, amazing, Sandy. I mean, it's just an incredible story. I'm so happy that you are where you are now with recovery, and that things worked out. And I mean, I would imagine there was a dip in revenue, but it seems like things are still hopping and business is thriving despite going through months. How long was the cancer journey for you? Was it like a year or so?
Yeah,
right?
It was just under a year. So it was September of last year until June this year.
Okay.
It was like all like everything, right? And yeah, there was a dip in revenue, but I figured as long as I was making enough to, pay the bills and pay the subcontractors and stuff, I wasn't looking to really grow or, hit that 6-figure mark or anything like that, because, obviously health takes precedence, right? So,
well, and luckily you had such a client pool built up by this point too. It's like you really didn't need to even worry about new clients or lead gen, which that's not kind of your style anyway. You're mostly based off of referrals and current clients. So the cool thing about that too is, as people know, you're going through stuff in a weird way. It's like it sounds terrible, but it's an amazing time to upsell additional services, because you're like, this is what we're going through, but we're still getting your projects done. And then, if you're looking to do more things, we could roll it out during this time, and you have the team behind you. So like, I'm sure there's a lot of clients who are like, yes, I want to support you. If we can do anything to support, just like the one for me. I mean, I didn't even ask them to do the second deposit. They did it for me. They just gave it to me. So yeah, kind of same thing. I mean, I think people are awesome when it comes down to that kind of situation. Typically, I mean, there's always a bad apple somewhere, but when you surround yourself with good people and good clients, that's amazing. So your story is incredible as far as how you made it through that, Sandy.
And this is a huge part of it too, is that I have never wanted to grow my business to where it's an agency with full-time employees and all this kind of stuff, because like you've talked about this in your podcast a lot, staying away from the sort of corporate side of things, right? Like, I can't stand corporate anything, right? Like I need to be one-on-one, have that personal relationship with anybody that I'm working with, and, clients and contractors and all that stuff. And, but having those relationships in place, it's like you said, like it made it a lot better. And yeah, revenue did dip a little bit, like I said, but it also, when I had Alexis working on these projects for me, it actually freed me up to do some other things on my business that I not never, but I wouldn't have gotten to nearly as quickly. So for instance, I read Profit First in the fall while I was going through chemo, and that was a game changer. So I spent a few days just restructuring how I manage all the business finances, and it's just been a total game changer since I did that. And then the guy that we talked about that I work with, who sends me referrals, he sent me a referral for this guy who he does. It's like one of these companies where you buy the coffee machine and you put it in, like you set it up in an office and do a coffee service, right? So I did that, and then they're like, "Oh, we have a whole bunch of these people. Can you do a template site and sell it for, this much money," kind of thing? And I'm like, "Yeah, I can do that." So I took that website, turned it into a template, and I've sold it to, I don't even know, like at least a dozen or more at this point.
Oh,
so now I have
this about that. Cool.
Yeah, no, I hadn't told you about that, but yeah, I have a template site now. And then there's actually another client too that the website turned into a template for other people in that field as well. So that all happened while I was going through this. And then there was some other stuff too, just like little things that I was working on my business while Alexis was working in my business. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Great point. And you were kind of forced into that situation during all that, but that's something that's a good reminder for people to do when you're scaling, because you are going to free up your time. It's interesting. And I don't know if you found this, but with scaling, it's like there's more time initially because you're creating systems and maybe doing a little more calls or project management, but it tends to even out. And then the pendulum swings when suddenly they're kind of off on their own and you have more time. It's like, oh my gosh, I could do whatever I want to do for the rest of this time while, someone's working on the project. So it's a perfect time to take the business side of things to the next level and solidify your systems and all that. Work on the business, like you said.
Yeah. Well, and what's funny too is that, so when I started all of this, or like when I started scaling and going into the cancer treatments, I had one system for my questionnaires, and I was using another thing for my contracts and anything that had to be signed. And then I had another platform that I was using for invoices. And so everything was kind of all over the place, but it was working. Right. And then Alexis was like, why don't you just put everything into Dubsado, because it does all of that stuff for you. And it's very similar to 17 Hats, but, a better price scale for smaller, businesses like mine kind of thing. So, so I started, looking into Dubsado, but because Alexis already uses it, she's like, well, I can transfer all this stuff for you. And so that became part of the admin work that she did for me.
Okay.
She took all of my contracts and set them up in there. She took all of my questionnaires and set them up in there. And she basically got all of this stuff set up for me so that I had to do the minimal stuff on my side to just like finish it and get it all ready. And now everything is confined into one platform, and it's so much easier and it's so much quicker to handle everything. And so you don't necessarily need to have all these things in place before if you end up working with somebody who can actually help you set them up, so that it worked out really well for me that way.
Oh, that's so amazing, Sandy. So what a beautiful story on how, you got the diagnosis, but had a pretty quick action plan for it and worked your way through it with the team, and then let your clients know, and then just kind of chipped away, knowing there'd be a little bit of a revenue loss, but not dramatic, not enough to put you out of business or anything, but you're able to get through that season. I'm kind of curious, since this year, really, we're talking November, so it's only been 5 months since the end of your last treatment, but what's it been like now? I feel like you're on the other side of scaling and business changes and cancer. So what have the last few months been like? And maybe we can kind of put a cap on, what's next for you, but like, what has the past few months been like for you?
It's still busy, and it's really great to be back at this full swing. I'm continuing to work with Alexis, and it's like I said, she's been doing entire website builds for me, which has been absolutely amazing. Now I'm on a couple of drugs to prevent a recurrence, and side effects are not always fun from that, but at least, I'd rather have side effects than, worse news. So,
sure.
I'm at the point now where, and I said this to you when we met at WordCamp, that, I would not go back to being a freelancer. I love working with Alexis. I love having that help and not being alone. And, like I said, because our design styles complement each other and she brings a different flair and different ideas, it just ups the level of the work that my business puts out. And that's the thing I've really had to wrap my head around, is that it's not the work that I'm putting out, it's the work that my business is putting out. I've had to separate myself from my business. And that I think was one of the hardest sort of mindset shifts I had to go through with all of this.
That is well said. I had to separate myself from my business. That is very well said, Sandy. It's so true. When you scale, it's like it becomes bigger than just you, really. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I don't know if you've seen this, but that helped me with boundaries and communication. And I didn't take things as personally. Like if a client didn't like his site, I'm like, before it just crushed me. I'm like, oh, how could they not like it? Whereas when I started scaling, it's like, all right, so you didn't like it. Let's look what did we miss here? How do we miss the mark? Then let's fix it. I don't know if you found that, but I found that it was like, it just made business less personal, which actually worked when it came to boundaries and feedback, revisions and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool, Sandy. So you're really in a new chapter in your business and in your life and everything. So, first off, where can people go to connect with you and find you? And I have one final question for you.
Oh, okay. Well, I just, I wanted, do you want to talk about the other, there was the chemo, but then that wasn't all of the treatments that I went through. Did you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I didn't realize. Yeah. I wasn't sure how deep that went.
No. Yeah. So I finished chemo at the beginning of January, and then, that mass that I talked about, hadn't shrunk at all with the chemo. It just became slightly less dense.
Okay.
So my surgeon was like, okay, you need a mastectomy. So I'm like, okay, you know what? At this point, I had known for a few months at that point that this was a very strong possibility. And I had talked to women who had had reconstruction. I talked to women who didn't. I did a lot of thinking and, mulling it over. Every time I thought about reconstruction, I felt this no from deep inside. Like it just was not for me. All the power to women who do, you have to do what's right for you. But for me, it was just like, I just don't want to go that route. So I said to my surgeon, okay, if that's the case, take them both and pull me flat, and that's what she did. And I have absolutely no regrets about it.
And was that towards the tail end? That was
in February of this year. Okay. So a month or so after chemo ended. And then the 2 lymph nodes that she took out during that surgery were both positive. So in April, I went back into surgery to have more lymph nodes removed because they want to get clear margins, right? So they took out a couple more, and one of them was positive and one of them was clear. So that's good. Gotcha. And then in May and June, I had 15 rounds of radiation. Yeah.
My gosh. I can't imagine. Yeah. I mean, what that takes out of you, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was the last round, right? The June. Yeah.
So the radiation finished the treatments as far as active treatments go. And I mean, I won't even get into the number of scans and everything else that I've gone through, but as far as the treatments go, that's what I went through. And like I said, now I'm on a couple of drugs to prevent a recurrence because it was a fairly aggressive cancer. So they want to make sure that, it doesn't come back. So
moving forward, do you have a vision moving forward? Are you in the phase of figuring out a vision for you and your business? Are you just is the plan to just kind of keep things as is and just kind of take it one slow step at a time? I mean, it's all fine. Like you can really do whatever you want now because you're a new person. You have a new mindset. You're a business owner now, which is really cool. That's one of the coolest things I've seen. You're a judo, right?
Jiu-jitsu.
Okay, jiu-jitsu.
Black belt in jiu-jitsu, yeah.
Black belt. So you've been a badass. Now you're like an extra. Not only can you kick someone's ass, but you also beat cancer. So it's like you are an ultimate force, Sandy. You're a business owner now. So
and I got a tattoo as well I don't know if you can see that very well, but yeah, it's my kickboxing gloves with the pink ribbon and it says "Fight Like a Girl."
Oh, that's awesome. I'm gonna watch it on YouTube. Yes, check that out. That is awesome. So what's next for you? I mean, you are I was going to say you're on fire. It matches perfectly with your website, Sandfire, but
that's awesome.
What's the vision? You're 10 years in, you've gone through an incredible journey now. Yeah. What's the vision for you moving forward?
You know what? I don't know how to answer that because the thing is that, it's one thing to say, okay, in a year from now, I see myself here. 5 years from now, I see myself here. But these last 2 years have taught me that you can have the best plans in the world and things are still going to happen. Like cancer was never part of the plan. It's never part of anybody's plan. Scaling wasn't part of the plan, but now not scaling is just not an option. Like I'm not going back kind of thing. I mean, my plan right now is just to continue with where I'm at. I'm not really looking to take on anybody else right now because, it's working out really well with just Alexis and I at this point. Yeah. But I mean, I'm not, saying no to that, in the future because you just don't know, so if it gets to the point where I do want to take on somebody else, then great. I've got this whole slew of people in Web Designer Pro who I can look at and they're all awesome in there. So, but yeah, I mean, my plan right now is just to kind of keep going and just see what opportunities come about and make the best of those.
I think that's great, especially after the year you've been through in the past couple of years altogether. And the cool thing is, like, we're leading into the end of the year, new year. It's always a fun time to to kind of cast a vision, but vision could be as simple as raising your rates, improving your processes, and just continuing to circle back around to current and past clients. You really, at this point now, it's like, what a time to be able to circle around. And I mean, who knows, maybe there are some groups online and in person with cancer survivors who maybe I don't know if that's a passion to help people out through that. But I've thought about that as a dad with a girl with special needs and what we've went through. Like I had thoroughly considered writing a NICU book one day on how the heck to get through the NICU experience. So I found like new passions. So I don't know. I just wonder, when anyone goes through a life altering event, which you certainly have, new passions always emerge. So I'm excited to, I've been a part of your journey, and I've seen you progress the last 5 years. Now I'm really excited to see the next 5 years, because I think,
thank you.
Who knows what's going to happen the next 5 years, but I think you're in a great spot. And it's you don't need an exact vision or plan at this point, but I imagine it's got to be pretty cool. I'm catching you, you just crossed through the light at the end of the tunnel. So now it's like, okay, there's open spaces. What do we do here? So I'm really excited, Sandy. I'm excited for you. Been a pleasure and an honor being a part of your journey so far. And I'm really excited to continue to be a part of your journey here moving forward. And that's one reason I'm doing my scaling course. And I'm going to open up some more intensive coaching options for those who want it in pro soon, just because folks like yourself, we got you here. Now it's time to get you there. So I'm excited to hopefully serve you better too, as you're kind of in the next stages.
Yeah. And I am actually, I've started writing a book about my cancer experience as well, just in case it helps other women who are going through this,
That's amazing. Eddie, want to share anything more than that on that, or is that going to be available for purchase one day, you think, or is it just kind of a passion?
If I'm able to get it written, it's all in my head right now, and I've started it, but and I've got some ideas for how I want it to play out. But yeah, really, it's more just to empower women who do want to go flat like this, that it is a very valid and healthy option, because the surgeons really push the reconstruction, and that's not the best thing for everybody, and I do belong to a number of groups on Facebook, a couple flat groups and a breast cancer group. And there's an unbelievable number of women who had reconstruction and then explanted to flat because they were just done with, everything that comes with that. So,
that's amazing. Oh, that's awesome, Sandy. If anyone's interested in knowing more about that, or maybe, being a potential reader of that, should they go to your website, your Facebook? Where should they go to contact you or connect with you?
Website or Facebook is probably good. Yeah. If they want to reach out, either of those places, you can reach me for sure.
Okay.
But yeah, if they fill out the contact form on the website, then I can just kind of keep them, in a pile there that, when this book does get written, then I can reach out and see if they're still interested. Yeah.
Might be time for a wait list just to see who's interested. Cause I'm sure that's such an amazing passion topic that I love that you're already started on that. So that's so cool, Sandy. Yeah, we'll link this, of course, but it's sandfire.ca, and then everyone can go there, and you can go down to the bottom, and your email's there or your Facebook, so they can connect with you there. Sandy, thank you for being an open book and being transparent about not only your journey and scaling, but cancer. This is like 3 episodes in one. We could talk about a 10-year journey. We could talk about scaling and talk about building and running your business through cancer. So this has been awesome. Thank you so much for your time. And again, what a joy to see you get to this point. I'm pumped for the next phase.
Thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
All right, Sandy, until next time, we'll definitely do a round 2, but this is good. This is like 3 in 1. So thanks again.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Woo, tough to top that one, my friends. What a journey. What 10 years so far in web design. And this is just one chapter for Sandy. I think you'll probably agree with me in saying that she has a very, very exciting new chapter that has started, and a very exciting future ahead of her as she continues to be a business owner, and all that she's learned through and gone through in the past 10 years. I can't wait to see what she does next. So I really hope this was some encouragement and some help for you in your journey, no matter where you are in web design. Again, as we talked about, Sandy, having been through a recent battle with cancer and breast loss, she is really passionate about helping others by sharing what she's experienced through this and how she got through it. So First of all, make sure to check her website out, sandfire.ca, just for inspiration to see what she's up to on design and with her business and what's working from her. But she will have the wait list there for her upcoming book. So make sure to sign up for that. Again, if you or somebody you know might be interested in that. Sandy even said she told me it'll probably light a fire under me to get this book going, and she'll probably give you some updates as she gets it closer to release. So make sure to go to her website, sandfire.ca, to connect with her and sign up for that. I hope you enjoyed this one, friends. Leave us a comment. Go to joshhall.co/298. Let Sandy know what you thought about this interview and the takeaways that you may have got from her journey and her experience. I told Sandy I'd make sure to relay any feedback her way. So go to joshhall.co/298. Leave us a comment. I will be looking at those, and then I'll let Sandy know to check those out too. She may even reply to you if you have any questions or want to connect with her. joshhall.co/298 to leave a reply. All right, friends. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you on the next episode as we inch closer to the big 300.